You know the drill, folks. Bring in the dog and cat, fire up the coffee pot, pour yourself a mug of something, throw a log on the fire, slip into those jammies and bunny slippers, turn down the lights, and turn up the radio. Because we're about ready to rumble. Tom DeLonge, the great UFO adventure story, and maybe a surprise ending. I'm George Knapp, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast to Coast. I got a call about 5 years ago, I think it was, out of the blue from a guy who said his name was Tom DeLonge. He had a band called Blink-182. And I'd heard of them, of course, and I'd heard his name. That band has sold, I don't know, close to 30 million albums. It remains wildly popular even now. Tom was the co-founder, lead guitarist, and vocalist, and about 10 years ago, sort of as a side project, he co-founded another band called Angels and Airwaves. It's also been very successful. But his passion all this time, through much of his life, has been UFOs. And the topic of aliens and UFOs would pop up in his song lyrics now and then. I think some of his fans probably would groan about it. It drove him crazy from time to time. After Tom had called me that first time to talk about UFOs, we continued our communications over the years. He joined me on this program a couple of times and then allowed me sort of a front row seat to what he's been doing. About a year ago, his life took a very dramatic turn. He announced he's leaving Blink-182, which caused a furor with his hardcore fans, of course. Said he was going to refocus his professional life. The working umbrella title, Secret Machines, an ambitious multi-platform effort, films, documentaries, books, fiction, and nonfiction. We're going to talk about all those, and we're going to talk about the unexpected turn that things took for Tom. Something truly unusual that happened along the way, the contacts he made in the UFO field that are absolutely unprecedented. Welcome back to the program, Tom DeLonge. Tom, good to have you. How are you? I hope I didn't build it up too much there.
You know, I was listening to that intro, and I was like, my God, I sound amazing. I'm sitting here kind of going, oh, they're all going to figure me out pretty soon, that I'm just a pretty normal guy, but I'm so excited to be here. This is always... I listened to Coast for 20-some years, and this is my third time being on here, and it's such a rush.
Well, this one's going to be a rush for everybody, I think, involved. I want to start with a little bit about you. I know you don't want to talk about this, but just for the benefit of the listeners who were not Blink or Angels fans, tell me a little bit about the musical career, how well you did, because the decision you made to change away from that, at least to some extent, it becomes all the more dramatic.
Yeah, well, I've been playing music as far back as I can remember, and when you start a band, you never think that you're going to go anywhere. So the biggest dreams and aspirations I had at the time were to play in front of neighbors, So I was like having these big, fanciful daydreams about playing in my cul-de-sac growing up. But the band was at the right place at the right time, and we did something that I think resonated with a lot of kids at the time. We kind of became the band known for, speaking for suburbia, and then MTV was exploding. So with a little bit of luck, we had kind of some of the right material to land on that channel. And then, the band exploded in the 90s, and we, ever since, we've had a career. And, but along the way, you mentioned, I had other things I was into. There was always so much more to who I was, but, obviously everyone knows me because of the music, but, just like anybody else out there, when I'm not on stage for the other 23 hours of the day, I was always doing other stuff.
I kid you about this, both in person and once on the air before, about your fans. Since I've come to know you, I follow you on social media, and I see what the fans say. Oh, no, there's Tom on his UFO binge again. So they chide you a little bit. Some of it is, is fun, and some of it, they don't want you to deal with it. But it's always been there.
Well, I will tell you this, and I think I even mentioned this to you in some of our conversations that weren't on the air, is even dealing with the Secret Machines project, I have met or come across people that, the subject can rub people the wrong way. But I found people that have built up walls that have been, so much taller and thicker than any wall that you would think somebody would build up, maybe because they're scared of the belief systems that they have, and they don't want, you're coming at them with something that really shakes them. So, but I don't know if that's the way, fans and people are, on my social media, if they're scared of the material or they just want me to go focus and do the music that they grew up and love, which is probably most likely it. But just for conversation's sake, being into this subject, and this even more than I, some people just like, nope, don't want to hear it, blinders on, I got to go to work, and,
right.
And sometimes they see it on the internet too.
Let's talk about your own experience, because you had an interest in this for a long time before you had anything like a paranormal, a UFO type experience. But on a camping trip, this is fairly recently, you had something really strange happen out in the desert.
Yeah, I did. And it's been the subject of a lot of interviews lately. We just had Rolling Stone in bed, a journalist with me last week for a handful of days, and they're going to help break this story right after we do tonight in the next issue of Rolling Stone, which is on the 8th. But even he was bringing up, he's like, what's going on with this camping trip, I did an interview with Paper Magazine, they're like a modern art magazine, and they wanted to do something on this subject, and they asked me, and I just kind of let the floodgates open. Once again, I'm just talking and thinking out loud as I'm talking, then you see it in print later, and you go, oh my God, people aren't going to understand this, and they're going to think I'm nuts. But it's really interesting. Before I tell you what's interesting here, let me tell you about what happened. We went out on to go film, and it was part of this documentary for the Secret Machines project, and we wanted to go out and start collecting footage. So we were on our way out to what's known as the NTS, or Nevada Test Site. You are the person who kind of told the entire world about the existence of Area 51. I mean, for anyone listening, if you know the term Area 51, George here is the one that taught you it. But that's not the only base out there. There's a lot of bases out there. There's a few bases, out west of there, and one was called China Lake. And we were trying to get our way out there, but it was too far of a drive at the time, so we decided to pull off the road outside of China Lake, and we were probably 100 miles from any gas station. I mean, we were somewhere on the fringes of Death Valley, but all I know is that we were off-roading for quite a while until we found a valley to camp in. And so I've done it a few other times for fun, and we have to go backwards a little bit. There was an individual that was very prominent in the UFO field for a while, and he was kind of all the rage, and he came up with this whole concept that the UFOs themselves or any advanced civilization was going to speak to or communicate on the level of consciousness, the frequency of consciousness. They're not going to be using AM, FM radios or whatever. So he had this whole concept that if you meditate and you do a certain protocol when you meditate, these things can show up. And I didn't know what to believe at the time, but I did meet a few professors from universities that were working with this guy, and they told me directly, oh my God, we've seen landings and stuff. And I was like, really? You really? So we would go out there. I took a couple buddies out there, and we would have fun and not really be sober, but we wanted to try it out either. Nothing ever really happened for us. But on this camping trip, we said, let's do it again, and so you're not doing anything. You're in the middle of the desert, so we tried it. And I remember right before we start this meditative kind of the protocol, it's step by step. You got to do certain things. I remember telling them, okay, I don't think anything's going to happen necessarily. We should try this. But if anything does happen, it's going to happen at 3 in the morning, And the two guys that were with me were like, why 3? I'm like, I don't know. It's just what time it always happens. If you read about people that have like abductions, or if they have sightings, or if anything that's weird at night with this phenomenon, somehow it always happens around that time, or a lot of the time it does. So we go through like a couple hours of this meditation, nothing happens, and then finally we're like, okay, it's time to go to bed, So we all cram into this tent in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we are in the middle of nowhere, and the fire's still going on outside the tent, so it's kind of all illuminated in there. So you get the sleeping bags, right? Say a few dumb jokes, and we go to sleep. I wake up and I hear hundreds of people talking around the tent, like so many voices. I can't make out anything. It was a chorus of voices. Then all of a sudden this thought enters my mind instantly. Oh, it's just a bunch of special ops soldiers on some multi-day hike coming through our tent area. Everything's cool. We're good, and I close my eyes, open back up. The fire's out. A couple hours have passed, and I was like, "What the hell was that?" So I woke everybody up first thing in the morning, super early, and I was like, "Oh my God, did you guys hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear all those voices?" And one guy was like, "No, not at all. I slept fine." But the other guy was like, "Yes, I heard people talking all around our tent." So I wasn't the only one. So I didn't feel too wildly crazy. But this is where it gets really interesting. George, John, is it John Keel, the researcher from the 70s?
Yeah.
He, our good friend Jeremy Corbell actually Instagrammed his book Trojan Horse not too long ago. It's from the 70s. It had a reprint. And because Jeremy Instagrammed it, I was like, I want to check that book out, so I bought it. And I'm reading it, and I was like, oh, my God. Somewhere around the first third of the book, it gets into this whole this is from the 70s, mind you. It gets into this whole scenario where a lady sees a UFO, or a car gets pushed over to the side of the road, and then she hears a chorus or choir of voices, just so many voices she can't hear what it is. They're swirling around the entire area, and just step by step goes through the exact same thing that happened to me out in the desert. So as we get into the conversation later tonight, one of the first things I did when I met the very important people we're going to talk about, I sent that over, and I said, this is exactly what went on with it.
Sorry to interrupt you. Marvin Gaye is telling us we need to take a break. Our conversation with Tom DeLonge will pick up in a minute, and we'll get back into that story of his strange experience in the desert. Much more to come here at Coast to Coast AM. I don't know if my guest tonight would agree with this, but I think this is a musical ancestor of Tom DeLonge's. Surf rockers known as the Shantays, a song called Pipeline from way back in 1963. We're talking with my guest, Tom DeLonge, about a somewhat amazing transformation he's made in his personal and professional life, sort of rechanneling his fortune and his energies away from music and into UFOs. And whether you believe the story that we're going to tell tonight about these amazing contacts that he's made who want this story out, there's nobody that's launched anything quite like this project, Secret Machines, movies, films, books, documentaries, and we're going to get into that in the next segment. Stick around. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. So for the last 60 years or so, if you say UFOs, somebody saw a UFO, the thoughts go to space aliens. These might be visitors from some other planet. People like John Keel, who was just mentioned a bit ago by Tom DeLonge, and Jacques Vallée and others put a twist on that starting in the 70s, saying maybe these UFOs, the things we're seeing in the skies, are not interplanetary spacecraft after all. Maybe they're something from closer to home. Tom, tell me this. Did this experience you had in the desert, which was not sort of a classical alien-type encounter, did it sort of change your take on the overall topic?
I don't know if it added to my take. I've never believed that UFOs were as simple as just a life, some kind of life form from another planet. I always thought it was much more complex than that. To me, I thought that Jacques Vallée and John Keel, they were both offering explanations that were really making somebody think about the absurdity of what UFOs do when people have some type of contact, or the abduction experiences, or all the cattle mutilations and crop circles and just the weird stuff that it's doing, and that even religious stuff, and the messages it's telling people. So when I had my experience, it just kind of added more fuel to the fire that it's a little bit more complex than that. And but honestly, that's one of the great things about the phenomenon. Once you start studying it, and once you try and find different rabbit holes to jump into, it's kind of never ending, because there's so much about this topic and about the phenomenon itself that you can learn for the next 500 decades and only kind of break through the surface of it.
So tell me this: how big a role did that experience play in the ultimate decision you made about a year ago to sort of change the focus?
Well, for people that are wondering if I care about music, anymore, I do. I'm doing more music now than I ever have, but it is a major shift. So I have a company called To the Stars, and what we're doing is do kind of communicating large themes and ideas in what's called as transmedia, where you do multi-platform releases on a subject. So that's no different than what you see on your big Marvel or DC Comics movies or stuff that Disney does, even Star Wars, where it's a franchise. It's an idea that lasts for many years, and they do a lot of movies. They'll do animations, they'll do books or whatever. Secret Machines is like that. All of the releases I'm doing have a piece of music with it, but I was, I'm more interested in things that are very challenging and things that are ambitious.
What the fuck?
I don't do well doing the same thing over and over again. If I'm not engaged cerebrally, I kind of feel like I'm dying a slow little death here. So I definitely put a lot on my plate this time.
So describe it. Describe the parameters of this project, what it involves.
Well, I knew that this was the greatest story never told. I knew that you don't even have to sensationalize anything about this subject, and it would blow people's minds. I also knew that it's never really been told in an elevated artistic way. You never really had, other than Close Encounters that Spielberg did so many years ago, that's probably the only one on a major level that took it decently seriously and put concepts out there for people to digest and think about and walk away saying, wow, because it was so elevated in the approach. I mean, it's the best director of all time. I thought that we kind of needed to do something like that again, but because I do know a lot about this subject, and I do know the complexities involved, and I do know that it is a national security issue and a global security issue, that I didn't want to come out and be this very public figure saying some of these things that I knew needed to be said without permission. So the whole project was, how do we do major motion pictures with documentaries, with novels, with nonfiction books, with step-by-step we kind of entertain and educate. And it all went back to not too many years ago when I was watching that movie 13 Days with Kevin Costner on the Cuban Missile Crisis. We've all been told about the Cuban Missile Crisis in school. They're like, oh my God, we almost died, and they were going to put weapons in Cuba, and we almost died. Did we tell you that we almost died? And you're like, okay, I got it. And you walk out of high school, and you don't really, the enormity of it thrown on your lap, you don't really digest it. So I was watching that movie, and it kind of, step by step, you go through the debates, and you're seeing the arguments, and you're seeing the fear, and you're seeing how families act, and you're like, wow, that was a pretty heavy time in our history. So I left, and I went to the bookstore to buy the actual recordings of JFK in the Oval Office. I wanted to hear those debates. I wanted to hear, how they dealt with the idea that nuclear war could break out at any minute. I wanted to see what those guys were saying, to figure it out, to decode that problem. And that's what I want to do with this project, where you pull people in, you galvanize them over the issue, and then they want to go and absorb the nonfiction elements. But a funny story to that JFK thing, when I was standing in line with the JFK tapes, all these CDs at the time, actually, of all the recordings of JFK, my phone rings, and I go, hello, and they go, Tom DeLonge. I go, yeah. And he goes, this is Senator Ted Kennedy. And I was like, wait, what? He goes, this is Senator Ted Kennedy. And I paused for a second. I was like, I'm holding recordings of your brother. He's all, you are? And I was like, yeah. He's all, hold on a second. He grabs somebody else, gets on the phone. He's all, Tom, this is Senator John Kerry. Come campaign with me. and I got into campaigning in Iowa, and people saw me in the elections during that time when he was running for president. But this whole entertain and educate model, I think, is something that needs to happen.
So to begin with, the books, you have 6 in mind to start with. Fiction, nonfiction?
Yeah, so we actually have 4 of them done. The fictional, what we call historical fiction, or another way that one of my advisors put out for us to put on there was threading historical events. But that is coming out on April 5th everywhere, and then we'll follow it with the first nonfiction book, and we'll just go back and forth between the fiction and the nonfiction. We're almost done with the 3 nonfiction books. We have 1 completely done, and the other 2 will be done in the next couple weeks. So, but the novel itself, it's all 700 pages of it, will be in stores everywhere on the 5th.
Well, we're going to talk about Secret Machines, Chasing Shadows in the next hour when we're joined by your co-author. Can you talk about the nonfiction books, what the general subjects are?
Yeah, so for some of the people out there that live in this world like like myself, I teamed up with an internationally recognized researcher named Peter Lavenda. Peter is what you would call an expert at the occult, and he did a lot of famous research about the Nazis and the rat lines and what the Germans were doing after World War II and all the occult, all the weird occult stuff that they were into, and when people start to understand more about the UFO phenomenon, and when they follow what Secret Machines is going to teach them, and mind you, as we'll talk about this in a little bit, it's not all coming from me; it's coming from other people of the highest places. That there's that the term the occult in that whole world is much more a part of the UFO phenomenon than that's part of what makes it more complex than just little green men in flying saucers and tinfoil hats, So Peter has been writing the nonfiction books for just as long as AJ's been writing the fictional books. So we've been working on this for a while.
The documentary projects, nonfiction documentaries that you've been working on, I've seen glimpses, some of the stuff, some of the interviews you've done. I guess part of that story is the contacts that were developed in the course of putting that together. But tell me about the documentary projects, as much as you want to reveal right now, about the kind of people you're talking to and what those subjects will be.
Sure. Well, when we started this project, I wanted to document my efforts of meeting the people in charge and telling the story about how I am basically building, hopefully, one of the largest covert communications vehicles that's been put together. And because I can't come out and tell everybody who these people are, and because I can't run around showing pictures and resumes and bios of who these, where these people have been, I figured the next best way to do it is to document and to tell the story of how I met these people and the information they've been giving me, and how we're going to attempt to communicate some of these things to people. And it's big stuff. And some of it's scary stuff. And like I said earlier, it's going to hit people's belief systems pretty hard on some issues. And it just needs to come out over time, and we need to finesse a certain way to build it all on. First, finesse it in a way to where we build it all on credibility. So when they read the Secret Machines novel and novels, they understand that we're not just trying to entertain them, that there's things in this book that were given to me that have never been given to the world ever in relationship to what the UFO phenomenon is and where it's from and what it's doing. A lot of this book is laying the foundation for even bigger stuff that's coming on book 2.
I want to talk for a moment about the political scene. And I'm not endorsing Hillary Clinton. I'm not endorsing John Podesta. I don't think you are either. I just find it amazing, and I don't even know if they could release the UFO files, even if they could find them. I just find it amazing that during the heat of a campaign that they're talking about, somewhere it would seem like they've done a big focus group or something that says it's okay. But to me, it doesn't make any sense. It just seems like it's a downer, that it could be something they'd be beaten over the head with. Yet you've had very open communications with Podesta. His interest in this goes way, way back, as does hers.
Yeah, I think people need to take, very, very, very strong notice of what's going on when Hillary Clinton comes on the Jimmy Kimmel show like she did a couple nights ago and says, we are going to dig in and bring out the UFO files, quote, unless it has to do with national security. That was the one caveat. So she's saying this needs to come out, but there might be some things that's going to hold some of it back. And she's letting you know with breadcrumbs here that there are national security issues with this stuff, and there are global security issues with this stuff. So her campaign manager, John Podesta, is a very, very powerful and important person. And a lot of this audience knows of him because he tweeted a few times about UFOs. One of his famous tweets last year was that his biggest failure for 2014 was not getting the UFO files released. But you have to look at who he is. He got President Clinton elected and was his chief of staff and got Obama elected and served as his transitional chief of staff and served for the majority of Obama's tenure as his senior advisor, and now he's the campaign chairman for Hillary, so if Hillary wins, he'll most likely be chief of staff for her. So you have a guy that's routinely getting people elected to the highest office in the world and then staying on to either run their office or be their senior advisor, and he's out there talking about UFOs like it's like it's anything else. And he is in my docuseries, and he was the story there was I reached out and I told him what I was trying to achieve with this project, and he was very quiet on the phone. He was listening, and I kind of went through what my objectives were, and I have my pitch down, but I'm speaking very respectfully, and I'm trying to lay out all the reasons why this needs to happen. But I didn't think that I really got through to him. And I didn't, for all I knew, he thought I was just some crazy, rock star that wants to talk about something weird, but I knew he was into this stuff, but I just didn't know how much or whatever. So he said, call me in a couple months. I'm pretty busy, and we'll see where we're at. I was like, cool. I never called him back because I didn't think he was really, absorbing what I pitched him. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just get this flurry of emails from his office that he wants to be in this. And I have to come out to D.C., and it's a major priority, and the rest is history. But I think people need to understand that we're in a transition here with this topic, and that some really big things are about to happen.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at here, is because I know for some listeners who just can't stand Hillary Clinton, it's trouble. They have trouble even listening to this part of it. But just set that stuff aside for a second and think for a moment about the significance of a major presidential candidate talking about this issue. It's like somebody flipped a light switch or something.
Well, you have an issue that's going to tackle cosmology and religion and scientific breakthroughs that will seem like magic to people. It'll relationships with countries that we're not supposed to have relationships with. Defense systems that we've been building secretly with enormous amounts of money for a very long period of time, where people, if they knew about it, would probably be in an uproar until they knew the reasons why, and then they would say, why didn't you tell me? I wish I could have helped you. The more that I found out about this stuff, and once they started giving me the information, I realized that that all these young people are going to look at these areas of our government and say, you guys are heroes. You guys are doing heroic stuff, incredible stuff, and no one knows about it, and you're letting all these weirdos on the internet define you and say it's all a big conspiracy, it's the big bad secret government, keeping secrets because they're better than us, or we can't handle the truth, or they're doing it for money and to control the world. Nothing could be further from the truth. Once you understand why they're keeping their efforts secret and what they've been doing, you will realize that they need to be empowered, and they need to be given every bit of resource that they could possibly need for what they're doing. And I'm excited to tell that part of the story. I'm excited for people to understand that these are good people doing important work, that thank God they were doing it.
Well, what it makes you wonder is, I made the comparison to somebody flipping a light switch, whether a green light has been given to a variety of people in the government that it's okay to start dribbling stuff out. I mean, people are talking to you. Someone somewhere knows those conversations are underway. I'm just wondering where ultimately this come from. Did they have a conference call and everybody said, okay, now's the time, or what do you think about it?
Well, it's hard to say. I think that I came in and brought an idea to the table that they don't readily have. I said, I walked in there with a voice, that they don't really have a position that speaks to young people the way I do. I also walked in there with, a thesis on the phenomenon that is correct, that's totally different than just visitors from another planet. So when they saw that I actually knew what I was talking about, I think that caught them a little bit off guard. And then I also said, I have a plan to do something that looks like this, and I kind of laid out the whole Secret Machines project, and they probably thought that was really interesting. But when I started executing, when I actually started doing the work and pulling the people together and getting all these advisors and writing the novel, and the novel being good and the documentary being good, and and everything happening the way I said it would, I think I built up an enormous amount of trust with these guys. But we have to be really clear here. I'm very respectful. I'm very formal about it. Everything's a yes sir and no sir. I'm speaking to guys where you can count all the stars on their shoulders. I mean, really, and I try to run this like a real program, the way they would want it run. So everything gets approval. Everything gets sent over, and I get just to give you guys an idea, I got a call that I was going to do a big interview with Newsweek last week. And so I did the interview, and at the end of the interview, I found out that it was a fake interview, and that my company set it up as a way for someone to help me craft the message for this, because they knew that I was dealing with national security, and that's not something that a musician normally ever has to worry about. So they set up this fake interview. So it wasn't a news, it was somebody to help me. They say, well, look, this is the kinds of things you're saying, and maybe you shouldn't say this way. But the cool thing about it was they recorded it. So I took that recording, and instantly I was happy about that. Everything else I was like, cool, tell me something, help me say things in a better way. But I went that evening, took that recording, and I sent it off to the main man. The main man out of 10 advisors I have, and he's a very big deal. And I
gave you feedback?
I got feedback, and I got 4 pages of notes of feedback. Things like saying, stop calling it the phenomenon, call it UFOs. Make sure people understand what you're talking about.
All right, in the next hour, we're going to invite your co-author of Secret Machines, the first book, A.J. Hartley, onto the program to talk about the learning curve for him. Then we're going to get into these 10 advisors or so that you put together, one by one, how you got together with them and the kinds of things that they have told you so far. Much more to come here with my guest, Tom DeLonge, on Coast to Coast AM. This song, called Whole Life, recorded in 2003, has never been released on a Paul McCartney album. That's McCartney collaborating with guitarist Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics. Great song. We're talking with musician, vocalist Tom DeLonge, who's still making music these days with his band Angels and Airwaves, but also has a lot more on his plate. The umbrella title for this multi-platform project is Secret Machines, the first of many books in the series. Secret Machines Chasing Shadows is available now, co-written by A.J. Hartley, who will join us in just a moment to talk about the process. Stay with us. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to the program. A.J. Hartley is the international best-selling author of 14 novels, including the new one, Secret Machines Chasing Shadows, co-written with my guest, Tom DeLonge. A.J. Hartley is a distinguished professor of Shakespeare at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, George.
I guess the obvious question is, what's a distinguished guy like you doing in company like this talking about UFOs?
That's a great question. I sometimes wonder. But, I think these are the kind of questions that people want to talk about. And my work as a Shakespearean has always been committed to the idea that Shakespeare was involved in the kind of stories that his audience wanted to hear, and the questions that he wanted to talk about, the people he wanted to talk about, and that's always been my way in, to try and write stories to come up with the kind of drama that people just want to hear.
Tom, what was the pitch you made to him, and why did you pick AJ?
Well, it's easy to pick the guy because he's an incredible novelist. He's a very elevated writer. I think when you look at his body of work and look at, just the art form itself, what he does, it was going to elevate the entire project to have somebody of his caliber come aboard. But what did I tell him? I think it was a very impassioned, speech that that we got to do something that's never really been attempted before, but this is real. It's like let me I remember I flew him out and just laid out all these documents, and just one by one, I was probably like, my hands in the air, like I got some huge, like I'm running to become president myself, and I'm pitching this story that's never been told before. And I think I was getting through to him, but I didn't know him at the time, so I wasn't quite sure if it was, if he was absorbing it or if he was thinking I was crazy. But it's probably a better question for him.
Well, AJ, there's a quote in the afterword of this book that says fiction does a better job of telling the truth than nonfiction, I guess. So, is this a true story that you're telling in a fictional venue?
Well, I mean, Tom and I talk about this a lot. Obviously, there are a couple of different kinds of truth, and for me as a storyteller, part of the truth that I'm trying to tell is a very human one, because my first connection when I'm writing a novel is about characters. It's about the stories that people actually experience, and trying to get the truth of that down. Now, as far as the truth of the larger story in more sort of objective sense, that's partly where Tom comes in. That he's relaying information to me all the time based on the people that he's talking to, and I'm working to incorporate that as best I can, and then. And as people then read the material, they were fact checking, and they were running interference to make sure that what we were saying was consistent and was in accord with all the best evidence that we had. And there are moments in the book that are based around very clearly documented things, events and things that. Well, in one case, there's actually a story of something that happened.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
Both remembered in the terms that I experienced it. Put it in the book.
Which story is that?
It's actually the narrative is divided into four main characters, and each one has a sort of running, alternating story all the way through the book. But those narratives are interspersed with what we call interludes, just little moments that have come from outside their particular those four characters' story, things that come from history or other kinds of documentation. And the first one in the book is an encounter, a sighting from a nobody, from an ordinary person who happens to be in Japan in the late 80s and sees something strange, and that person was me.
I noticed you had a chapter on Wilfred de Brouwer and the sightings in late 1989 there. There was one on Betty and Barney Hill. There was a short chapter on Admiral Richard Byrd. So you intersperse those things with the activities of your characters. I thought it was a nice touch. Also, it reminded me of Close Encounters, how you it starts with these disparate characters all over different parts of the world, and then the threads of the story bring them all together. And you bring them together, I don't want to give away too much, but my state of Nevada has a heck of a lot to do with it.
That's right. That's right. One of the challenges, I think, when Tom and I first started talking about the book, and he was saying, I want to cover this period and things happening all over the world. And for me as a novelist, I'm thinking, okay, how the hell am I going to make that work as a single narrative? And we sort of hit on the idea of weaving those four main stories together, but that to make the narrative feel coherent, to get a sense of unity and progression towards a particular end, it made sense to try and somehow bring all of those four stories into a single timeline and a single place. And in the process also for the chapters to start getting shorter and shorter and more surprising and more action-driven as the narrative sort of builds to a climax.
And I want to throw something in, too.
Sure.
This worked to my advantage when I started meeting the people within the government, because I was explaining how we would insert important information. And the genius of what AJ was able to put together was that each character is learning something on their own journey. So, we have a pilot that gets promoted to what he doesn't understand is a civilian program, even though it's kind of being run by the government, military, or there's another lady that is, her father is a world banker, and she has to take over his duties and understand that he was privately financing these weird aerospace companies, and you go through all these characters, but they each have to learn something. And the reason that worked really well when I met the people within the government was I was able to say, as we put information that has never been out there into these stories, then the people reading them and the viewers of the feature films and the television series and however we put it out there will learn the stuff step by step with the characters, so we won't throw too much on somebody's lap that scares them. Because frankly, the stuff that I've gotten over the past 2 months that we're going to be putting in book 2 is some pretty scary stuff, and so it really worked to our benefit to let it all go forward with the support of these people.
So you started with one book, in mind, and it changed in the course of writing it because of these encounters and you had with real people who were telling you things that you didn't know before.
Right. Well, we knew, AJ and I knew we were going to do at least 3 books, but we didn't know what they would have in it. We just tackled this first one. We knew the scope of this subject matter. We had ideas of how we wanted to kind of lay it out on a macro level, but I will say absolutely 100% that the communications that I'm getting now is going to give us far and away most of the material. For book number 2, we're going to be getting into the oceans. We're going to be getting into viruses. We're going to be getting into a lot of different stuff. But AJ is going to be able to sit down and through all of this madness, have it make sense and be palatable. And that's thank God that he's here with us.
AJ, let me ask you this. I mean, people study this topic for decades, and they still don't get their heads around it. I'm one of them. I can imagine the learning curve for putting something like this together. It's pretty steep.
It is, and that was the one thing. I think Tom and I started talking, about 18 months ago or so, and initially that was the thing that I found hardest, just to get started. As you say, there's a lot to learn. Tom was sending me books. He was sending me, links to documents online, the YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff. And I was getting a bit overwhelmed. And again, trying to then find a way to turn that into a single coherent narrative that would work as a novel, right? As well as a documentary. So you've got multiple challenges ahead: synthesizing the material, learning the material, turning it into a book that ordinary people are going to find entertaining as well as compelling. And I remember getting close to the end of the year before last, and thinking, oh my God, okay, so the first chapter I'm writing, and I was committed to, was this putting myself in the position of a fighter pilot over Afghanistan, and that's no picnic, writing when you're not a fighter pilot who has experience flying over Afghanistan, just getting into that mindset and knowing exactly what it's like to be in a plane and make it feel like it's absolutely real. And Colin said this 1,000 times. It's got to feel real. We're telling a really important story, and it's got to feel absolutely compelling. So it was a huge amount of research, and then I still found myself getting on the phone with fighter pilots and saying, okay, and then what do you do? And how do you make the plane do this? And all that sort of stuff. And getting them to vet what I was saying, so that it was working. And it was still nerve-wracking to send the first 10,000 words or so to Tom and say, am I in the ballpark? Is this what you're looking for?
You know, one of the scenarios, again, without giving the whole thing away, but we discussed the idea of cover-up and the government cover-up. And, of course, there is no the government. There's a great big apparatus. One hand often doesn't know what the other is doing. For a subject like this, the chances are, and you and I can get into this later, Tom, but the chances are the people who really know the big picture, you can almost count them on your fingers. You guys have a plot device in there where it's private money outside the government that funds sort of some of the stuff that's going on there, which is sort of the scenario that I've come to believe is probably true, that whatever hardware might exist, it would make sense that it would be outside the purview of government, that some people within government might know about it, but that it would make sense to take it out of government into private hands or another government's hands or somewhere where FOIA couldn't be used, something like that. Was that how you intended to do it all the way along, Tom? Is that scenario?
It is, and I think, for people that look into this subject long enough, they're going to see some threads that have been around for a very long time. I mean, one of the threads is, that when the first crashes happened, we pulled together intelligence, military, and private industry, and we brought those brightest minds together and said, what do we do, and how do we attack this? And one of the things we do to this day is big private companies or even publicly traded companies, but they're still not government companies. It's still not like the military isn't building their own craft somewhere. They use really, really incredible minds at big public or private companies, but they're still kind of operating underneath the Department of Defense. But they're not really a part of the government, but they're doing their own thing, but what they're building they don't really own. It's a really interesting way of how it works. I was amazed when, I have a group out of the 10 advisors that I have, 3 of them are of the brightest scientific and engineering minds in the entire military-industrial complex. These are the guys that work 9 months out of the year, they work over at Area 51, and that's the truth. And to learn kind of how things are it's so different than what you come up with by reading just all these dumb conspiracy blogs your whole life, which we've all fallen into if you like this stuff, because where else are you going to go? But they might be building something that truly has anti-gravity. But they don't own it, even though they're paying for it, and it's theirs, kind of, and it's their own building, but the building's on government land. But it's just it's kind of convoluted, but it's an interesting dance, and it's just, I don't know. I find myself, I feel like I'm a kid that's walking in a museum, and he's just blown away by every little painting on the wall, and I'm trying to be respectful and not keep asking, too many absurd questions, but I'm hoping that people realize what we're doing is real, and it's going to make its way into these books and into the films, and you're going to learn a whole lot.
AJ, using the novel as the approach, as the venue for telling this part of the story, it also allows plausible deniability for the people who are guiding Tom and giving you information via him as proxy. It allows them to say, well, it's just fiction. Don't take it too seriously, if that's what they want to do, while at the same time guiding the structure of the story.
Exactly. I think you're right. Yeah, it's a great way. And your reference before to Close Encounters is a good one, because that's a story about people experiencing this phenomena exclusively from the outside. And we wanted a blend of that with the exploring of people who are increasingly on the inside of the story. But as you say, ultimately, everybody is shaped by it's a novel, right? It's a work of fiction. So yes, and I think Tom can speak to this perhaps more directly. But we were constantly being presented with information where we felt we were being led in very particular directions, but there was that House of Cards type line, if you know the original British TV show, where they would say, where somebody would say something and the minister would say, well, you might think that, but I can't possibly comment. And that's their way of saying, yes, that's exactly what's going on, but I'm not going to tell you officially.
Is there anything that Tom shared with you or you learned as part of this learning curve that you said to yourself, I'm not buying that. I don't believe it. I'm not going to write it. It's just too much for me.
I think, as an academic, I'm trained to be skeptical. And I think we definitely had our Scully moments here where I would sort of put the brakes on a little bit or ask different kinds of questions. And I think, there were moments when we got into some of the sort of ancient aliens type things where I was saying, well, I don't know that I buy that. I was trained in part as an Egyptologist. I worked a little bit as an archaeologist before I became a Shakespeare professor. And so I know a little bit about things like hieroglyphs. So when people say, look, there's a hieroglyph representing a UFO, I can look at that and say, actually, no, I don't.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
How the grammar of this works, and that's not what this would be doing. So, whenever we ran into something where we weren't in agreement, I think we backed away and said, well, okay, so let's push it into an area where we are much more sort of on the same page, and we're more sure of what we're saying because you want to be able to believe what it is that you're doing. I don't think there's anything in the book where I say I'm writing something that I actually believe to be false. I don't think that's the case at all.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. A.J. Hartley, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your insight. I read the book. It's a wonderful read, and it's going to be a great movie, assuming that it is made into a movie. I want to thank you for joining us. We're going to be back with Tom DeLonge in a moment and get into the meat of this, who these people are he's been talking to, at least a general description. And if you wonder what he does when he's not chasing UFO mysteries, this is a song from his band, Angels and Airwaves. It's called Tunnels. From 2014, a song called Ends of the Earth, the ethereal sound of Lord Huron. We're talking with musician Tom DeLonge, whose band Angels and Airwaves were heard a couple of minutes ago. He's sort of redirected and refocused much of his energies and his fortune into the pursuit and launching of a project called Secret Machines, a multi-platform project, films, documentaries, books, music, to explore the kinds of themes that we discuss on this program often. And he's told us that he has a group of advisors within and without government who've been telling him things they say is the real truth about these mysteries. So the obvious questions, how do we know they're telling the truth? Are they leading him down the path? Are they giving him disinformation? How can he prove any of this stuff to be real? We're going to get into all that stuff in our upcoming segments here on Coast to Coast AM. Our thanks again to A.J. Hartley for joining us to talk about Secret Machines Chasing Shadows, the first novel in the series of books being launched under this multi-platform project that Tom DeLonge has been describing for us. Tom, let's get down to the brass tacks, though. You had this project sort of in mind before you met these guys, right?
I did, yeah, I did. I didn't quite know how I was going to get the support that I wanted. I had ideas of how to start, but I'm the kind of guy that's always sniffed out if there is an opportunity somewhere to push something forward that seemed difficult. It's just looking for opportunities in everyday life, and I've had a few of those in this kind of category. But in the foreword of the novel, so we've been talking about the novel. It's going to come out. April 5th. It'll be everywhere. But I sent a few versions out to people before to read it, but the foreword wasn't in there. But this book will have the foreword in it. I describe a series of events that started a lot of this stuff, and I think that is a pretty interesting story.
Well, let's get into it. You made this decision, and it's risky for you. I mean, I remember when you just making the decision at the announcement. All right, look, I'm done with Blink 182. There are people online that practically want to shoot you, and they were really mad. But I mean, it's risky for you financially to do this. I mean, the Secret Machines is a big project. It's got to be financially viable, or it doesn't make it.
Yeah, it's a real project. I have a company that needs the projects to work. It's the whole thing is risky in many ways. I think we can even start back a little earlier, there's going to be a teaser that launches here shortly that has some clips from the documentary side of things that I'm doing. And in it, there is a person that's silhouetted that's been a very, very high-level defense contractor and engineer out at Groom Lake, Area 51, for decades. And he says something in that teaser. But that person, long ago, I remember when I was telling him a little bit about what I wanted to do, he gave me a call the next day and called me on a video chat. So he gets on there, and he goes, I made calls about you. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, I did. He goes, you better be really effing careful. If someone comes up to you and asks you to get in the car and go for a ride, don't get in that car. And I laughed it off, and I said, come on, man. I literally, it sounded like a movie to me, so I kind of just chuckled. And he goes, I'm being really effing serious with you right now. If someone comes by and asks you to go for a ride, don't get in the car. I am not effing around with you. And he's pointing at me. I'm being very serious. You're playing with some serious stuff using different words, And at that point, my heart was beating really fast, and I said, "You're being very serious right now, aren't you?" He said, "Yes, I'm being very, very serious with you." And because of that conversation, all the events that transpired after that, when I started meeting certain people, I went in very, very respectful and asked for permission on everything that I did, and treated it the way that these guys treat it, which is it is a national and global security issue.
Let's talk about the process of how you sort of pierce the veil, because that's what people are going to have trouble buying. How is it this rock star guy gains access to this when so many people, senators and researchers and scientists and spooks who've tried to look for this stuff couldn't find it? How do you get the access? How do you explain that?
Well, let me might as well just tell you the story. So
yeah.
the way the first, it spells this out a little bit in the foreword to the book, but I had an opportunity to go to an event. So the most classified and the most advanced group of engineers and scientists that work within the military-industrial complex work under one specific group, and it's a very, very quiet group. But for the very first time, they were doing an event where family members can come and not go in the buildings, but at least celebrate in the parking lot what their loved ones do during the day, And they asked me, would you come up? And because I knew this one individual that told me to be really careful, he goes, hey, look, this is a way for you to come up and see a little bit about what we're doing. And I said, oh my God, I would love to. And he said, do you want to come and introduce the head of the company to the crowd? And I said, I will if I get to sit with him for 5 minutes. I don't know why I said that. I just knew that was an opportunity that, guys like me would kill, because I knew exactly who this group of engineers were. I knew exactly what they do, So the head guy, are you kidding me? Yeah, lock me in a room with this dude. And so I got that opportunity. I went up and I did the introduction to the crowd, and then I got the 5 minutes to sit down alone and say whatever it was I wanted to say. So at that time, I didn't say anything about this subject. I just said, hey, I have an idea for a project. And this project, I think, if it's done correctly, will reverse the cynicism that people have about government and what people have about the, frankly, the military-industrial complex. I think that if I do this, places like this and other arms of the government would be happy that it got communicated. But I didn't bring up anything that was
you didn't mention UFOs.
You don't mention UFOs. Don't even do that, because you'll get kicked right out of the door. So he goes, okay, that's great. And I said, can I come up in a couple weeks and tell you more about it? Absolutely. So a couple weeks go by, then I come back up. I go through 4 layers of security. I go through machine guns, guys with machine guns. and then I get escorted into a very specific building that's with a bunch of buildings. This is somewhere out in the middle of the desert somewhere. And then I go through 2 layers of electronic code entry systems, and then you hear the locks go, they make their sounds and the doors open up. Now I'm in a hallway, and that hallway has speakers lining the ceiling and just playing white noise, kind of like TV static. And that's there so you don't hear anybody's conversations. And the hallway also has a series of doors, and all the doors have kind of like those big rotary locks, like a safe lock on them. So we go through that hallway, and then they just twist the knobs on the doors, and then you hear the big sound, and that door opens up, and now I'm in the center of the building where the top 3 engineers work with the head of the company. And so I walk in, and they're sitting there, and they're ready for what it is I wanted to pitch them. So, I'm nervously trying to figure out what I'm going to say. I had no idea that, I had no plan for even bringing up UFOs then either. I was smarter than that. So we're talking, and one person apparently did a bunch of research on me and knew that I was all into the subject. So halfway through the conversation, this person says, so what about all the conspiracy stuff that you're into? And so now I'm being eyeballed by 3 very important people, and I'm just totally got caught, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do right now? So I tried to talk my way out of it, and then in comes the head of the company, the big dude, and kind of saved the moment, but at the same time, he got introduced to the conversation right at that point. So I said, you come in at a very interesting part of the conversation. This person brought up, the whole UFO issue with me. I just want you to know that I don't plan on, treating that disrespectfully with this project. And then I got interrupted, and the head guy says, we cannot be involved with anything that has anything to do with that subject, especially since there has been absolutely no evidence whatsoever that it exists. So bam, I'm just cut off right there. And now my heart's racing, and I'm like, where do I do? So the only thing that I can think of at the moment is I said, well, Edgar Allan Mitchell, the 6th man to walk on the moon, is out telling all the young people of the world that this is real. So we have a credibility issue that we have to attack, but we don't have to attack it here or now, and we could talk this through. It's just something that young people think, and I want you to know a little bit more about my project. And so I got my way through. I was like, oh, my God, I'm still here. So they said, okay, continue. So that specific meeting ended, and then I just said, hell with it. I said, sir, can I speak to you for 5 minutes alone? This is the Tom that even my old band members know. I'll just go for something. This is the punk rock kid inside of me, right? So, and he goes, sure. And so the other people kind of look at me weird, and they're like, okay, so we leave. And I kind of looked at them, so they did. So they stood up, and I shut the door. And now I'm in the middle of all these different layers of security, and I'm sitting with this person, and I just go for broke. I just go, this is exactly what I said. I want you to understand something. And I sit down 2 feet in front of him, and he's staring at me in the suit. I go, I understand the national security implications about what I'm about to say. I am not naive to the topic, and I think if you hear me out, you're going to see that there's merit in what I'm about to propose. And he goes, well, what topic are you talking about? And I go, UFOs, sir. Now, this is what I want to try and do. And so then I just laid out this entire Secret Machines project idea. And I said, I'm going to send, and I said, but over the past 30 years, there's been a program to indoctrinate people to the idea that this might be real. But the problem is all the young adults of the world, they use the internet, they have iPhones, they talk to each other much quicker than people ever have. So this program that everyone's been following from the 50s is far outdated. It's antiquated. People have surpassed it, and now they don't trust you guys. Now they don't like you guys. Now they graduate from MIT and they want to work for Elon Musk, and they don't want to work here. Help me help you guys. And he stops me, and because I said, frankly, there's been some bad things that have happened for the past 30 years on the subject, and he stops me, and I'm kind of going, okay, so now I'm in trouble. I just went right into this stuff. What's going to happen? And he looks at me, he takes a breath, and he goes, what kind of bad things has the government done with this subject? Very, very calm and staring me straight in the eyes. And so I came up with a couple things that I can't say here. And I said, if you allow me to do this, what I'm trying to do, then I'm going to ask you for some help. I need advisors. I need people to help guide me so I don't keep disinforming people. I will not do that anymore. We need to tell the truth. And I just, you know what I said at the time? I said, you got to picture those little chickens running across the road and someone's guiding them. I'm that little chicken, and I'm racing, but I don't want to get hit by a car along the way, you know. And but it was no joke. When there was nothing to laugh at during this time. So I said, I'm going to send you something. I want you to read it, and please, if you find anything about it good, you know, if there's any kind of merit in this at all, I would just respond any way you can, because I didn't think you could respond in an email or anything. He goes, okay, thank you for that. And then the meeting was done. So what I did was, the nonfiction books that we've been working on right next to the Secret Machines novel in parallel it's a thesis of the UFO phenomenon. So I took the prologue to that thesis and I sent it to him. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? I shouldn't have sent it in an email. Obviously you don't send it in an email. Every email you have with this group, it has all these like government, stamps all over the email, because it goes through DoD servers and all this stuff. But I had no other way to get it to him, so I did. So I just sat there, and I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks. I was like, okay, that relationship's done. I fried that thing. I went in there talking about, I tell people it's like walking into somebody during World War II and say, hey, about that nuclear bomb you're building in secret, I want to talk to you about that. That's basically what I did. Well, 2 weeks later, I get this email, and it says, I want you to be next to the Pentagon at this date and this time. You're going to be meeting somebody from the CIA, basically. It said it in a different way, but I can't say what it said. And so I was like, oh, my God, like, it's working. So I get on a plane, and I fly out to D.C., and this is where it gets pretty sketchy, but it was insane. So I go to my meeting. I had to go to a very specific location that was within a rock's throw of the Pentagon, and I go to the back of a room at a certain location, and there's two guys in suits waiting at a table for me. So I go and I sit down at the table, and the person I was talking to is one of the persons, and he goes, I think this would be a good time for you to tell this person what you told me. And I'm sitting there kind of, in my mind, I'm going, well, what do I say? Do I tell him everything I told you? Or some of the things, am I allowed to tell him that I told you these things? Or I had no idea what to say, so I said, okay, I'll just go for it. So I went through the exact same pitch. So I talked for about 20-some minutes because they were just eyeballing me like hawks, So at this point, I just don't know. I've never been in these situations before, so I didn't know if I was saying the wrong thing or not, but I was just trying to be very respectful, and I went through with it. And I finished my speech. And the person is just staring at me. I mean, these squinting eyes, the beard, the suit. I mean, looks exactly straight out of a movie, an espionage movie. Takes a breath and goes, things like this don't happen at the White House. They don't happen at the Hill. They happen in places like this, at tables like this, where a few men get together and decide to push the ball down the field. And then the meeting was done. I mean, done, like a movie done. So the very next day, I got sent over to NASA. And I'm at the highest level at NASA. I decided to do the same thing where I ask everyone to leave. So this one person, I did the pitch one more time. And they said, you need to meet somebody. So that person flies out to San Diego. I go to another meeting. We get on a conference call, and this person is a very important in the military. Can't say which branch, but it's the highest level of rank. But then after they left that particular branch of the military, they did something very, very important for another agency. And that person says, come fly and meet me up here in San Francisco. So within the next 48 hours. So I got on a plane and I go there. And now I'm sitting on NASA Ames. NASA has three divisions. There's Ames Research, JPL, and then just NASA, the traditional NASA that everyone knows. I'm at Ames Research Center. And I go through my whole pitch again. And this person stops me and goes, I just want you to know I'm a skeptic on this stuff. And I said, I understand that, sir, but I knew you would say that, but let me just continue and tell you what I'm trying to do. 20 minutes later, I just want you to know I'm a skeptic. And I go, I know you are. You already said that, you know. And I keep talking. And by the time I got to kind of concluding what this project would be, he's just staring at me. And then he takes a deep breath and says, introduce him to the general. And then I was like, well, who's that? And they're both just staring at me because there was this guy that was right next to him, a very serious guy. And I all of a sudden, on my email 2 hours later, I'm talking to somebody that has changed the entire course of this whole project. So I get on the phone with that person that same evening, and I go through the same situation. So I'm starting to walk through what I'm trying to do and how I plan to do it. And this person goes, I want you to know I'm a skeptic on this stuff. And I go, sir, I knew you would say that, but let me explain a little bit more. So I walk through it again, and then the person goes, I just got to say it, I'm a skeptic. You know, it was verbatim what I
They
heard.
all do it, right? They all do it.
They all do it. But on the third time, he goes, I swore an oath to my country. And I said, sir, I know you did. And I'm not asking for you to give me classified information. I don't deserve it. But I think if you understand what I'm about to do with this project, you may think it deserves your attention. And then he goes, I'm afraid what you might find is a bunch of men in suits standing around an elephant. And I said, I was afraid you were going to say that, but can you help me? And he says, fly out and meet me. And that's where
things get interesting.
This is where things get interesting. So I fly out.
I'll tell you what, Tom, we're going to take a break here in a minute. So you're about to get into some really good stuff. We're going to save it to the other side. I should say that without giving too much away, you and I had some conversations along the way too, and I heard your pitch evolve, and it got pretty good. I mean, after a while, you got pretty practiced at it, and maybe we'll hear a little bit more about the pitch in the next segment, and then you can tell us about the general. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. A garage band named Chad Allen and the Expressions came up with this great sound back in 1965. The song is Shaken All Over. That was before the band changed their name to the Guess Who. You might remember that tune. We're talking with Tom DeLonge of Angels and Airwaves and Blink 182 about his project Secret Machines. And we're getting into the good stuff about these people from behind the scenes that he met who've been sharing information with him. I guess the obvious questions, how do we know they're telling him the truth? How do we know that this stuff can be verified? And where is it all leading? What effect does this have on the push for full disclosure on the UFO topic? We'll get into all of that and more in this hour on Coast to Coast AM. Tom, before the break, I mentioned that your pitch you were making to these folks as you move from one source to the next, up the food chain, so to speak, your pitch gets better. And what is the basic message? What are you telling them that you can offer that hasn't been offered to them before?
I think for the first time, somebody coming in that has a pretty serious academic background on the subject of the UFO phenomenon, somebody that also has, a recognizable name and a specific type of voice that speaks to a specific demographic. Also, somebody that comes in with tremendous amount of respect and modesty when dealing with these guys. I'm not just some kind of Hollywood prick, I'm treating the material the way it needs to be treated, at least with my first conversations with these guys. And then lastly, once they gave me a little bit, I executed exactly the way I said I would, and I think that kept building in their minds, a great case to work with me.
So they dribbled something out to see how you'd handle it?
They did. They would dribble it out, and I would say, I would take it, I would incorporate it, I would make sure that I run everything by them like I said that I would. I would tell them that when, I would say, that we're doing this piece of nonfiction, here's the first couple chapters. Remember I told you I was doing that? Or here's the novel. You know, we talked about the novel. I want you to read the first part of the novel. Sir, is it okay if I do it this way or this? And it just kept going and going and going. And then you know, what really I think clinched it was, you know, actually I should back up here. When I got connected to the general, that was a big breakthrough. And before I talk a little bit more about how I got more trust from these guys, what happened is I was up at NASA Ames. You know, I got connected to a very specific person, and that person had me fly out and meet them. So this is where it gets really interesting. So I go out to a certain city, and I land at the airport, and I walk through security, and I meet this person. The person takes me to a restaurant that's right past security, and I go to the back of the restaurant. There's nobody in that area, and we sit at a booth for 2 hours. And while we're sitting there, he leans across the table, and this is the very first words that were said to me. It was the Cold War, and every single day we lived under the threat of nuclear war. Every single day we believed and really thought in the deepest part of our souls that nuclear war could happen at any given moment. And then he stops, and he goes, and somewhere in those years, and he looked me in the eye, he goes, we found a life form. And everything that we did and every decision that we made with that life form was because of the consciousness at that time. And I said, sir, you know, when taking into account things that this life form has done, for example, turning our nuclear weapons on and readying them for launch, and then he interrupts me, puts a finger in my face, and says, there are heroes in Russia. Heroes. And under grave risk to himself and to his country, they did not fire back. And at that moment, I realized it already started. This new game I was in of working with people in like a dance of words, and information was already coming. There was no like small talk. Like we didn't just sit down and just say, hey, let's have a beer and let's like get to know each other.
So let's jump back to that. Let's jump back to that conversation. It was the Cold War. I mean, he's given you sort of the setting for how the cover-up, or what we'd call the cover-up, began.
Yeah, so this is very important for people to remember, and this is where I'm so excited to start chopping down all these pathetic conspiracies that I was involved in as well. You know, it was the Cold War. He's saying that every day they really thought about the annihilation of all mankind with these, you know, weapons that were hundreds or thousands of times bigger than what we dropped on Japan, and we had 20,000 each of those things. And all of a sudden, something falls on their laps that's just extraordinary, you know. But even further than that, if you really hear what I'm saying about the nuclear weapons, the UFOs were turning our weapons on, and just so Russia could pick up that we're firing our missiles and fire theirs first. It was a big chess game. So these guys went into complete secrecy to start coming up with a defense system against this phenomenon. Now, you know, I try to tell people some analogies on this. Imagine if someone from the CIA came to your house and sat on your couch and says, hey, I want to tell you about that nuclear weapon that they tried to smuggle in through Canada 2 months ago. And I also want to tell you about this, you know, virus that almost got released in Los Angeles. And I want to, you know, all these they're not going to do that, because they're going to be busy trying to figure out to find the people that did it, or to seal off the borders, or to come up with a game plan to get better defensive measures across our country, and whatever they're doing. That's how this is. That's how big this issue is. They're not worried about if you and I totally understand, because they're too busy trying to understand it and come up with a way to defend against it. And at the same time, they really want people to understand this, to know these things, but they don't want it to mess up their efforts. The more that I started to find out, I thought it was a pretty heroic tale. that these were really good men and women. Do you know that in that first conversation that I had with that general, during the 2 hours, I mean, I didn't even leave the airport. I was in this back booth, and then I'd go to security, get on a plane, and go right back home. It was a crazy meeting. But during that, he must have brought up what was best for the, quote, best for the Republic, best for the free republic. He brought that up probably 8 different times. It's very, very, very important to these men what is best for the United States as a free country, free-thinking man, and the republic that we built. They're not these crazies running around trying to war. They're not warmongers, you know. Very smart. This person has multiple PhDs.
I'm like 1,000 off. Oh my God.
I wish I could tell you who he is and what he. There was nobody above him. There's nobody. Maybe a couple, but when you look at the divisions of how the Department of Defense works, and
Why
this
does it look
specific
so crazy
division,
out right now? Oh my God!
It's just extraordinary that I have this contact. So I started using that as much as I could. So I said, taking it from that point, we talked for 2 hours, and I said, "Sir, I need an advisory committee," and we walked through what I need and why. And so he went out and got the advisors for me. What was really interesting about this is that I started getting advisors that were in different areas, you know, people that deal with space, people that deal with intelligence, people that deal with biowarfare, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think I should need, but I got them, you know. And now I had the ability to start pulling these people together, and I had this one really interesting contact out in Washington, D.C. that was connected to the highest levels of government. That's how I can say it. And so I was able to pull off a coup in regards to what anybody in this field has ever been able to pull off, which was a conversation with not only my advisors, the most important group of the advisors, and somebody representing basically the highest levels of the land, and talking about how do we do something to help the youth understand that this is a reality, but that they're doing really good work, and they could use the empowerment. They could use the citizens of the United States and the world understanding why it's been kept secret, and that they're not doing it out of malicious reasons. They're doing it because it's an ongoing task. It's an ongoing issue, and they don't fully understand it yet, but they're trying their hardest and spending lots of money and have the brightest minds that they can find, and they're building things, and they're having breakthroughs that I think, frankly, we would all be incredibly proud of as a nation of what they've done.
You know, obviously it's a spin. You know, they're telling you a version that they want told, but it's a story you wanted to tell. It's part of your pitch to them is, look, you guys look bad, especially to young people who think there's been a cover-up on this subject. People are demanding full disclosure. There's a growing movement and a growing call for that. You guys painted yourself into a corner, and it's time to look for a way out, and this is one. So, I mean, obviously you're concerned that you're being used, aren't you?
Well, you know what? People have asked me that, and I'll say no, and let me tell you why. Because I sought these people out, and I asked them a very direct question, and I get a very direct answer. There is no like, hey, why don't you say this? Have you ever thought of this? And I don't get information for no reason at all. It's a very formal approach the way I do things. I'll say, why has it been kept secret? I'll say, in the book, the craft that our pilot character learns how to fly is a real craft. And so I'll say, sir, I need guidance on the science of this, and I will get that answer back, And it's not, I never get information that I don't specifically ask for. So this whole project is not meant to sell people on the idea that this stuff's real. Sorry, I said a bad word. Hopefully we got that delay set up there. I am still me, but I don't go in here and I'm not trying to make this project convince people of the reality of the phenomenon. I'm doing a project to tell people the reasons it's been kept secret and what has happened, what they're dealing with, the breakthroughs that we had, and I think the specific things that I've always wanted to know, and if I think everybody learns these things, they're going to feel a hell of a lot more proud about our country and about the Department of Defense and what they're doing, because this one subject deals with religion, cosmology, physics, science, secrecy, the way we run our country, the relationships we have with other countries, relationships we have with other countries we're not supposed to have relationships with, but we actually kind of still do because of this issue. And that stuff's empowering. That's really empowering to know, for the whole next generation of people that are going to grow up and take over all these countries when we're all long gone. I think that this kind of subject can unify in so many areas beyond so many other other subjects that are out there.
Did you get the sense that this group had ever met before? Had had a sort of the gathering or the conference call, or was in regular communication?
The main, who I refer to as the general, I know has dealings with all these people. Most of them, out of the 10, at certain times. Some of them no. A few of them I got through different routes. The way I look at it, it's interesting that when you look at the way the government is set up when it goes into subjects like this, and you look at the way it's managed, it makes perfect sense. So, we all grew up in this topic thinking, Majestic 12 and this secret shadow government. It's not really like that. Now, you have groups within the military that are doing R&D, that are coming up with and analyzing intelligence. So, the National Reconnaissance Office will analyze the entire electromagnetic spectrum of space, and they'll see things buzzing around and doing stuff. They take that down. Then, the Air Material Command will, look at that stuff and say, okay, what do we build to defend against that? And the research labs will say, okay, well, this is how we'll build it. And then the CIA will have a bunch of guys that are just analyzing, abduction reports or cattle mutilations or other things that are happening in the real world. And all these divisions are all doing their own stuff, and there's probably a very, very, very small group of people that are sitting at the top and putting it all together. I was told that I asked a very specific question. Sir, this is exactly, it's funny because I talk that way, but I literally said that. I go, sir, is there anybody standing back and looking at the big picture? You have abductions, you have cattle mutilations, you have, spacecraft zipping through orbit, you have these crashes, you have all these things. And at one point it was, no, it's a grab bag of scientists. Nobody's looking at the big picture, which is really interesting to me, because I wonder if, and I don't know all the answers yet, and I'm still taking my time asking the right questions, but it makes me almost feel like, some crazy things happened back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and we put together a really strong effort to study the stuff, but I think that most of the stuff has been out of reach, so we don't have some major, MJ-12 program per se. I think we have many programs that are dealing with different aspects of this when they happen, when a crash may happen. Let me tell you a conversation I had. So I flew out to Colorado Springs, which is where Air Force Space Command is, and also the Air Force Academy. And I was sitting on the deck of a very highly ranked person, and then we brought in, this is one of my advisors, and then we brought in another advisor that was I'm trying to figure out ways to tell who these guys are, but of the highest rank again. And they said, well, what do you, I said, I'm going to be talking about the crashes in the 40s. There was a pause, and he says, why just the 40s? Gets you thinking a little bit. And then they said, well, what do you need? And I said, well, I think I need someone from the Defense Intelligence Agency. And they say, why? And I say, well, I don't want to make anyone angry. I'm not looking to piss anyone off. I'm not looking to ruffle feathers, break a story. I think if I do my project correctly, it'll do good. And they take a pause, and they're looking at me, and now I'm kind of going, well, what did I say wrong? And one guy says, do you go ask your dad for permission after your mother already gave it to you? And I said, no, what do you mean? And then he says, you've been given permission, now shut the F up and get to work. And it was very serious. And I had these two guys, once again, you can count the stars on their shoulders, staring at me, that I realized, oh, my God. That's when I realized two other people that I met that were working with me, who they really were, not just by their rank, but who they really were, in context to what the whole UFO subject is. So it's an exciting place to be, but it's a little nerve-wracking.
We mentioned at the beginning about John Podesta. Now, you've interviewed Podesta. That's public information. That's publicly known. I don't know if you're saying that he's one of your advisors, but if so, that would be the only name that has been known. But I wanted to point out, as far as political and partisan connections, he would be the only one linked to any candidate or office holder in your group, right?
John Podesta is in my documentary and my docuseries. I think he's somebody that everybody needs to watch. That's all I'm going to say.
And like I said before, I have in my mind, you said there's no MJ-12 type organization. I have in my mind a smoke-filled room, and it's like Spectre from the James Bond movie, but there's no meetings. Hey, everybody, let's get together. You're MJ-1, you're MJ-2. That doesn't happen. It's compartmentalization, which is pretty much what you'd expect to happen with a topic like this.
Right, and I'm not going to say that I don't know if there is a group of 12 guys, 10 guys, 20 guys that manage all of it. I haven't asked that specific question yet. I've asked a lot of questions. In the docuseries, you're going to start to see all those. I'm going to start presenting all that stuff and laying it out, in chronological order, and people are going to learn a hell of a lot. But I haven't asked, is there a small group that manages this other than what I told you a few minutes ago, where I said, anybody standing back and looking at the big picture. It seems to me that, you got to think about this UFO phenomenon.
Hold on a moment, Tom. That's the Foo Fighters. That's what people used to call UFOs before they called them UFOs or UAPs, is Foo Fighters. Back with more of Tom DeLonge's disclosures here, including some of the big picture stuff. Who are these visitors? Where are they from? What are they up to? Whatever you can tell us coming up next on Coast to Coast. White Houses, The Animals from 1968. That band's still out touring around. I think they're coming to Las Vegas soon. We're talking with Tom DeLonge about this amazing journey he's on, people he is speaking to in and out of government who are sharing information with him about the inner workings of what we would all characterize as the UFO cover-up. The idea of full disclosure. Do we need to know all this stuff? How much does he know? What's the big picture? Going to get into that in the next segment here on Coast to Coast AM. Tom, as a guy who's followed this topic for a long time, you know about disinformation. You know the history of the topic, how certain researchers have been led to believe that they're about to get some real solid stuff. I think Linda Howe was promised some video of a landing. Robert Emenegger, his film project years ago, we're going to give you the goods, the video of the landing. We're going to tell you the whole story. You know about the disinformation in New Mexico, and a lot of people don't think that the MJ-12 documents were created as part of a plot to confuse the Russians. How do you know you're not being used or led down a path?
Well, I think that's a good question. Number one, these guys didn't search me out. I haven't had, in my advisory group, I haven't had anybody that just kind of came out of nowhere and says, hey, I really want to give you something. It didn't work that way. It was through really interesting channels of how I met them, and some of which I've built relationships with that are very close and came from very kind of, in very sanitized ways, where I think, people wouldn't suspect that they don't have an interest in lying to me. They're not. If I was working with a big group from the CIA, I would be very weary of it. But all of my guys are. They're the channels that they work in. I should say guys and girls, but the places that they work and the divisions that they work in are more science-based, engineering-based, and defense-based, and something else I can't say. But
they're not necessarily professional spooks who deal with stirring the pot and misleading people.
Exactly.
They're real, though. You've checked out the credentials.
Oh, yeah.
You know that they work in the places.
Oh, absolutely, because I've been to the places, and I've, I even attempted to read, I attempted to read something that one of these guys did, and it was like 20 pages of equations that you would think it's a joke. There was somebody's, is what they did there. When you get your PhD, you got to do your what do you call it, the dissertation or whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called, but
yeah.
It's insanity, the level of how these guys operate. But I don't want to say they're not in intelligence. It's just the type of the intelligence arm that they're in is not counterintelligence based. It's I don't want to say what it is, but it's space intelligence.
What is the operating agreement? What agreement do you have with them? You don't reveal their names or personal information about them, and do you have to clear the stuff that you release?
Absolutely, and I ask for permission. I don't, I'm not going to say who they are. I'm not going to, ever put at risk, anything that they, and also too, by the way, things they tell me that I have to release a certain way, respectfully, and in drips. Like, I set up a bunch of parameters of how I will put the information into this project and how I will put it out there so it does a couple things. It doesn't scare people and it gets traction with young adults. That's a very important point.
You know what you're up against, though. People will say, well, look, this guy's a rock musician. They're not going to tell this stuff to him, or they're going to tell him stuff that they have plausible deniability. I mean, part of that is the appeal, right? That if they wanted to, if this goes wrong, they can discredit you or deny it.
Well, they can do that to anybody. I mean, they do that to presidents. You're talking about, levels of power that we can't comprehend as civilians. So I'm not. I frankly, I don't care if anyone, doesn't believe me. I'm in the middle of something very important. I just got to do what I said I'll do. And I think if I do it right, it's going to have some really good effects and hopefully ignite, other things that can happen within this discussion. But, plausible deniability is something the government has always done, and it's the way they operate, especially when they want to put out very serious information. With this topic, what they've done is they would leak things over the past 60 years and create ridicule for the people that may believe it. That way, everyone kind of hears the stuff. You hear about the Roswell crash, but you're not really scared about it because the chances are it might not be real, but maybe it could be real. But
like Area 51, flying saucers out at S4.
Yeah, exactly. It's all that stuff they want you to know. The reason we talk about it is because they chose for us to hear about it, and the reason we kind of laugh it off is because they, by design, that's how they do it. But they want people to know. They don't like the fact that they have to do all of this without people knowing what they're doing and how hard they're working at it. And what I said to a few of them, I was like, do you know what this would do? It would change who we elect in office. It would change the amount of money we appropriate and allocate to these programs. We'd have the biggest space program that we've ever had, thousands of times bigger than Apollo, and it would be part defense and it would be part exploration, and people would run to be a part of it and help. It would be like the day after 9/11 where everyone wanted to sign up to the military. If people knew what the stakes were, if they just knew what these guys are telling me, and once people know this stuff, and if it really caught fire and everyone knew it, that this was real, it would completely it would change everything. It would just change everything, how we operate as a country, how we operate in partnership with other countries, and what our civilization is doing. Because don't forget that, yes, we have cracked gravity, and yes, we are building machinery that have anti-gravity. And yes, I was told that. It's a big deal.
All right, let's talk about some of the stuff you were told that you can share. The biggest question, who are they? I mean, I think I said in the introduction that some people in your group refer to them not as aliens or the visitors, they refer to them as the others. Is there significance in using that term?
You know, I don't know the significance of the others. The phenomenon is not used. Aliens is not used. It's the others, and when you're taught, the way it's explained to me is that they are gods, with the little g. So the entire UFO phenomenon is about multiple gods that fight amongst themselves and by design factionalize mankind into different religions to step back and let us fight each other, so it has other things that it wants to accomplish, and we don't notice them because we're too involved fighting each other. So, and they know that. So our government knows that. Our government knows that the others are instigating war amongst mankind. But the other issue is that these gods from you got to look back at ancient history and all those stories about gods that came down and did this and that. It's all true. So that's the other thing. You got to, and I'll get into that in the docuseries. There's some of that stuff I don't want to get into tonight, but the government is very aware that this intelligence is pitting different countries against each other based on religion, on purpose, and it's a scary scenario. So it's a multiple front war that we're fighting, because now we have to worry about each other and we have to worry about the others. So that's part of the reason for the secrecy, is not to. We don't want everyone knowing our vulnerabilities, and we don't want everyone knowing the advancements we've made to protect everybody against multiple adversaries.
Well, multiple adversaries, some of them being humans, like the Russians. You mentioned earlier an incident that we've reported some of these kinds of incidents. I personally investigated them in Russia, about Russian ICBMs being activated after UFOs are over a base that are ready to launch, that somebody else is controlling them. We know that we've had incidents like that in our country. Is it somebody just messing with us?
Yeah, it's absolutely. And the scary thing is, and the way it's been told to me, is that we are trying to keep it secret so we don't get the conflict. We don't initiate a conflict where other people aren't, quote, considering the manipulations of the others. So it's like this really touchy dance that we've been doing for 60 years, trying to figure out who is being manipulated as a country more than the other. Not the others, but we just know that when you look at places, you got to think about this, for example. Now go back to when Bush came out and he's talking about Iran and North Korea, and the axis of evil, and that's our government making a blanket statement that they're really concerned about these areas. Then you kind of go deeper into the parts of the government that know about the UFO phenomenon, the ones they call the others, the ones that are influencing countries, the ones that are by design or maybe by accident happening to crash a very advanced piece of technology in the country's borders so they make better weapons to fight bigger wars. And we're not the only ones that have had a crash. Yes, and so when we make big statements about North Korea or big statements about Iran or China, it's because we are aware that those places are being manipulated and have very advanced technologies now. So we're trying to keep everyone calm, and not initiate a conflict. So we're looking kind of over our left shoulder and our right shoulder, and at the same time, every once in a while, trying to tell everybody about it, but we can't really tell everybody about it. And I think that once people know this stuff, in whatever form. If everyone knew all this stuff, like they came out and told everybody this, from the White House, I just think people would want to help. I think people would say, "Oh my God, it's all been secret for completely different reasons than ego-based reasons. Like they don't want me to know, or I can't handle it, or they think they're better than me." It's like it has nothing to do with it. It's an act of war.
So the overall picture that we get, filling in the blanks from what you've said tonight, is that something sort of dropped in our laps back at the beginning of the Cold War. And the same kind of thing seems to have dropped in the laps of maybe the Russians and maybe others.
And, quote, potentially just to see who is stronger. And that's a scary thing. That's, quote, we don't know. But that's what that's literally how these guys have to think. It's
like a multi-level chess game or something.
That's exactly what it is. It's a multi-level chess game. And they have to sit back and go, what is the reason they just happen to have had a crash here? What is the reason there's a huge religious war going on right now? What is the reason that all of a sudden, China's defense budget has quadrupled in the past few years? It's all these things. And I think that creates a pretty stressful picture. And the other thing is, too, they can't come out and tell
that I'm the
everybody
cream
all
of the
these
crop
religions that are firing all over the planet for the past thousands of years are based off things they saw in the sky. It's like that's gonna hit hard at home for a lot of people. It's gonna be hard to digest.
Charles Fort, the founder of the Fortean movement, he had a statement that he said after all the years of strange stories that he collected, he feels that we're property. And then I remember, just as an adjunct to that, right when I first started chasing these mysteries, there was a book called Gods of Eden by a guy named William Bramley, who wrote it and then just kind of went away, which sort of painted the picture that we are like cattle. We're an agricultural product. If you wanted to know why there might be reasons why some of the big picture is kept from us, I mean, people say they're ready to know the full picture. I'm not sure they are.
Yeah, I don't know if people are either. I do know, and as of 2 weeks ago, we all had suspicions about cattle mutilations being involved with the phenomenon. I do know that, yes, absolutely they are. And, I mean, just a couple days, they found, 10 or 20 elk lined up in the snow with all their jaws cored up and their genitals all cut out and the blood was missing, and the same exact thing that's been happening for decades. And that's creepy. That's demonic. That's evil, weird, scientific, dark stuff going on, and it's been happening for a very long time. And I think it would scare people that we might be property. We might be,
harvested.
You got to look at the big picture. Is that what's happening right now? Is everyone believes something different about God, and we're all killing each other over it, and we all have advanced weaponry based off crashes that just happen to fall on our borders. And then while we're doing that, these things are zipping around and doing weird things with animals, doing weird things with people and abductions, and they're off, trying to accomplish something. You and I have had discussions about the pain and the anger and the emotional energy of all the war. Maybe there's something there that is something that they're interested in, the emotional side of things, and which is hard to think of, but it's still energy,
I can hear people sort of gnashing their teeth and thinking, well, this can't be true, therefore it isn't, which is sort of the same approach a lot of people have taken to UFOs in general. I don't think it's true, therefore I'm not going to give it any thought, and it can't be true, and so I've made up my mind. I get the feeling you're going to run into a lot of that. You
might, or I might, but I'm not doing this. I'm not stupid. I didn't walk off a gigantic rock and roll stage that was really easy living to jump into something that's very dangerous, deals with national security, and meet with a bunch of people in very clandestine ways, to write a bunch of very expensive, labor-intensive books, and make a bunch of risky movies with a bunch of people in Hollywood that are frankly sometimes hard to get along with because it's a different culture than I'm used to. I didn't do all of that because I'm dumb. I didn't do all of it for fame. And so people have to realize that, and I think a lot of my fans know this stuff. They know that when I'm into something, I jump in head first, and I go all the way with it. This is gotta be the most important thing I've ever done. And if it works the way that I think it can work, it could be paradigm shifting. I was talking to someone the other day whom you connected me with about creating a user-generated way to ask my advisors questions from the people who so badly want answers that have been studying this stuff for decades like myself. I've asked some very, very big questions, but I think getting people involved and pushing questions my way to get some answers, I think would be really, really cool. And I'm looking forward to that.
I think we're going to open up the phone lines in the next hour, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of secrecy. And I don't know how far you're willing to go on that. But you'd agree with, we got like a minute before the break, but you'd agree that some of the things that are kept secret should not be kept secret. There are no legitimate reasons for it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely think that. I was told that in the White House they would stamp, this is actually in John Podesta's interview, he says we would stamp things top secret just to make sure someone read it. Because people were so inundated with documents that even in the White House they would say just put top secret on it, then it'll make sure everyone will read that memo, So there's a lot of things that don't need to be secret. When Hillary Clinton was on Jimmy Kimmel the other night saying, hey, let's release all these UFO files except for the ones that have national security implications, well, it's going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of UFO stuff that they can't release because, like I said, it's an active war. It is a war, and it gets hot at times, and it's something they're dealing with every single day. I was told there's a very interesting story. About 36 months ago.
Hold on. That's a really good one. We're going to Jimi Hendrix taking us into the break, and when we come back on the other side, going to tell us a story about something very dramatic that happened 36 months ago. Talk with Tom DeLonge. We'll be opening up the phone lines in a bit, and you can ask questions and make comments as well. Stay with us. Out of Knoxville, Tennessee, that's a band called the V-Roys. The song is called Strange. It's a really good tune. The band was a favorite of critics. I sure liked them, but they didn't stick around. That's a great song. You ought to check it out sometime. We're talking with Tom DeLonge of Angels and Airwaves and Blink-182 about his project, Secret Machines. And we've heard a lot of stuff here tonight. The idea that there is another intelligence operating among us that is referred to as the others, that they sort of mess with us. There are projects and people within government and outside of government that are trying to figure this stuff out. But the overall picture is pretty grim. We folks who talk about UFO stuff on a regular basis, the subject of disclosure comes up. Hey, we're ready. We're ready. We know we can handle it. Tell us the full story. And it makes you wonder, are we really ready for the full story? If the truth is that we humans are an agricultural product, are we ready to hear that? When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. I have one more story I want to hear Tom tell us, and then we'll hear what's on your mind as well here on Coast to Coast AM. So, Tom, before the break, you were going to tell us about something dramatic that happened 36 months ago. What is it?
There was an alert that went out that all of our nuclear weapons and the weapons that are at the tip of the spear for NATO, so it's all of NATO's weapons, that over a third of them were simultaneously being shut down within our oceans by UFOs that were zipping around and shutting these things down. And I think, what's scary about there's actually another part of the story, and the mechanisms by which that keep a lot of those online come from space, and then those mechanisms in space were being shut down at the exact same time. So it had to do with space and the oceans. And they put together, I know somebody that had to go into a very secure location and go through all these different levels of security to go to another hidden location, and there was a guy in a suit that says you're going to lead an investigation on this and figure out what went wrong. And the team that was put together for this was like first-year staff, first-year soldiers, like a communication soldier and like a, some enlisted guy, What? And the whole point is that they didn't want to find the answer. So when NATO comes asking and all the countries come asking, like, who's shutting down all of our weapons, they go say, oh, we ran an investigation. We had this, this hack team that we put together, and
figure it out.
Really, yeah, it's just a big cover, because they're actively working on it, but they don't want people to know what the real work is,
What makes me worry even more is that whether it could be the Russians, that they've got some technology that these others gave to them just to mess with us.
Well, that is part of the story, and it's a very, very specific and clear part of the story that I've been given that I will be communicating, and that will be in the books, but the docuseries, I'll talk about that quite a lot. There is a major advancements that Russia has, that we have, that China has, based on technology that has either been given by design or given by accident. I personally, from everything I'm hearing, it seems to look like it was given by design. Once again, like I told you earlier, quote, to see who is the stronger, and that's a scary thought, to give weaponry like that and to step back and say, now go kill each other, and we'll work with the ones that are left over. So like you said it the best. It is this crazy complex game of chess that's going on.
We've been in this a long time, and I've been right there pounding the pulpit along with everybody else, saying we're ready for disclosure. Tell us the truth. End this cover up. And you have to step back and wonder sometimes, is that the case? And the longer people are in this field, some of the colleagues that I work with over the years, the people whose opinions I respect the most, all sort of gravitate to that position. Hey, maybe this is not such a good idea, because this stuff could be profoundly disturbing to get the full picture, that we might be an agricultural product, that there is some kind of entity that might as well be a god, or I'm thinking about the stories of Skinwalker Ranch that we've written about, where this thing at best is ambivalent, but it can do all kinds of stuff. It seems to feed off of fear. It can be very dark and threatening at times. I remember laughing at people who would say, it's not aliens, it's demons. I couldn't laugh anymore. I'm not so sure about that.
There is a very, very strong link between what people think demons are from the Bible and other religions, and the UFO phenomenon. And what you have is something that doesn't like man, period, and something that feels either jealous of or has some kind of plan for what man is to be. And that just makes it that much worse when you think about it. I have a quote here I should read you. It says, and this is from one of the advisors, would the link of aliens creating man, who then created God to keep us in our place, be something worth keeping secret? Mind you, secret with a K, which is how we do secret machines. So I think so. We're talking about the biggest institutions on the planet and the world's major religions. It's bigger than just the big bad U.S. government, and going back to the Greeks, and including Russians and Germans, make it sufficiently global across centuries. Maybe evidence of disappeared ancient cultures, Easter Island, the Maya, the Inca. That's evidence of what happened for those who did not obey, thus encouraging the secret to be kept. And could the story evolve from how different groups of men exploited this technology, to see how the entire secret is uncovered, rewriting world history and shattering many of our most well-regarded holy institutions, except this time when they come to wipe us out like the other ones, we are actually ready for them. And that readiness is another example why things have been kept quiet for so long and has been a strange international partnership indeed.
But now they're allowing some of it to dribble out. I would hope that some of your advisors are listening tonight.
I'm telling you that this whole story And I remember when I got this specific communication, it made me feel more empowered. We think that there's like this crazy conspiracy going on and this big cover-up, and maybe to some effect that's what you can call it. But really, this is the sequence of events. In Germany, they had some crashes. They started doing some advanced work. In World War II, right after World War II, we had some crashes. Maybe Russia had some crashes. Everyone factionalizes around that period of time. Maybe China had some crashes. We cover the whole thing up. No one really knows about it. But what we really did is we went into these incredibly secret places, underground or whatever these bases are, places that are out in Nevada and all over the world, and we started working like crazy with the brightest minds, with huge amounts of money, with just with passion and with resilience and with everything at our disposal to come up with a way to protect everybody. Anti-gravity craft, different weapons and space, different psychological operations that we play on the public. I think part of the cover-up is a psychological operation, so the UFO occupants themselves still think we know nothing about them. And I think that's part of the plan. It's part of it. Everything has been a big chess game to make the others not know how far along we've gotten to fight back. And I think that is something people need to know. And once again, I'm going to say it here, I'm going to keep saying the same thing over and over again. I think once people learn this stuff, they're going to lose a lot of cynicism about the government.
Let's take a couple of calls. Wildcard line, Rosie in Tucson. Hi, Rosie. You're on with Tom DeLonge.
Hi, George. Thank you for having me. And Tom, I just want to say I've been seems now like a lifelong fan of you. I followed your entire career, and you're actually one of the people that really got me interested in the whole phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it. So I've been really interested in everything that you've been doing lately. But I wanted to ask you a question about your camping experience that you talked about in the beginning, saying your experiment that you did, which I'm very familiar with, the meditation, I guess they call it the CE5. And I wanted to know if you have done that experience since then, or if you still believe that, is something relevant, or and also if what you experienced, do you think it was the others, or what you've learned of these beings being?
That's a good question. Years ago, Jacques Vallée, you hear George and I talk about him a lot, astrophysicist from France, the godfather of ufology. In his book, Invisible College, he talks about that same thing happening, a guy that can meditate and make these things show up. He brought the guy to the Pentagon, and out of the window, I think he was a colonel or something, the guy made a UFO show up, and it's in his book. Well, I happen to know a guy that can do that, and I'm hoping and have every reason to believe that he will be in the documentary, and he'll do it for us. And this is a kid, I think he's like 22 years old. He lives in Los Angeles, and he goes out every Sunday and makes these orbs appear, because these things, these little machines, just drones or whatever, just sit there and wait for somebody to do that meditation protocol, and then it senses the frequency of somebody wanting to see it, and then it decloaks itself for people to see. But this kid does it every Sunday. I've met him before, and I've seen all of the videos because they video it every time they go out. It's crazy. So when I went camping, my experience was so odd, and I've read, like I said earlier, I've read about it before. And what do I think it was? Yeah, I definitely think it was something to do with this entire phenomenon. Absolutely, but only, somebody else witnessed it with me. The other person slept right through it. But I think there's something to do with meditation and the way the brain works when you meditate that has something to do with this phenomenon. There's we have a tendency to call it interdimensional, or we have a tendency to call it supernatural, but really, if we look up and we see a bunch of stars in the sky, but if we put on really expensive night vision goggles, you'll see like millions of more stars. That's not supernatural. It's just a lot of light that your eyes can't pick up. It's all still there. This phenomenon is a very just real. It's machines. It's with living things in these machines, and they're doing very physical things. They just move very fast, and they might be a bit invisible because of the way the machine works. So, but the whole thing with consciousness, I posed a really interesting question to my advisor, one of the 10 advisors I have, about a week ago when they found gravity. I thought about it for a little bit, and then I sent a message where I said, is gravity consciousness? Is that what gravity is? The one thing that binds the universe together, but it's also the hardest thing to detect, but the most powerful thing there is. Maybe it's the exact same thing. And so when they found gravity and announced it in the press, I got a very specific communication from the advisors that said, this is going to open up doors for you. And when I think about consciousness and meditating and these things popping up and gravity having something to do with how they fly around, whatever, there's something really interesting about that, and it's all coming out.
Yeah, there's a lot of high level interest in exactly those topics. It sounds crazy and exotic, but it's some of the brightest people that I know are thinking exactly along those lines. We're going to go to the Wild Card 2 line. Robert in Baltimore. Hi, Robert.
Tom. George, what you said before about the impact on people is very, very significant. I think it can be a very great impact. But the key issue here, Tom, is not your covering of new information. In fact, everything you have talked about tonight, I have heard from many other sources because I listen to this stuff quite a bit. There are hundreds of books on UFOs. Linda Moulton Howe has herself made maybe over 100 videos that are available on the Internet. There are many hundreds of others. In regard to what you just talked about with regard to the meditation and what amounts to stimulating the pineal gland so that the telepathic capabilities of the human are more stimulated, Stephen Greer now has groups all around the earth who are doing this kind of thing, and they can call up the UFOs when they would like to have them come, and they are doing that. And there are many videos about that available. There are, I counted 500 videos on the Internet availability on YouTube.
Do you have a question for Tom? Robert, do you have a question?
My question is, do you realize that isn't the issue? Most of the things you've talked about are already very well known, and I suspect that you may not be aware that the question is letting the public see it. And there have been 10 or 15 movies that have done exactly what you're trying to do, but the public doesn't get to see them except occasionally on cable TV. Like The Hidden Hand is one movie that comes to mind, but there are another 10. I don't know whether you've had the time to look at all of these other things, but how...
So, Robert, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you have a question for Tom?
Okay, yeah. My question is, how are you going to get any better distribution of your material, which I believe is the same as we've seen, to the public any more than they're getting now? The cable companies have turned off all of the UFO shows. They've been taken off of all of the on-demand. Do you think you're going to get distribution? Can you stop the CIA from blocking distribution and the Men in Black from...
All right, let's hear let's hear the answer. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for the question.
No, I appreciate everything that he said. I know of all the videos. I speak to Linda Howe all the time. Not all the time, but quite a number of times. I know a lot of the researchers. I've read all the hundreds of books out there, so I'm very familiar with everything he's talking about, or everything you, sir, have been talking about. The difference with my project now is basically you're asking, what information am I giving that isn't already out there? And the second thing is, how am I going to get my stuff out there and have it not be shut down, or how am I going to get it out there on a large level? The stuff that is being given to me of who they are and what they're doing and why it's being kept secret and what pieces are connected to it, The difference is I'm getting direct answers about specific things. And all this stuff exists out there in some form, but nobody knows how to traverse the information and pull out what's fact. Nobody knows. You can go out there and read 200 books, but all you have is 200 books worth of information, and you have not a damn clue what any of it, if it's fact or not. What I'm doing is getting the very big answers or questions answered. And then I'm taking that, and then the second part of what you asked was, how am I going to get it out there? Well, I'm just, because of what I've done for a living and who I'm represented by and how I work within the entertainment industry, I'm just able to do it at a different level. And the fact that I'm working with these people in the government, I'm able to bring something that's of extreme and different value to entertainment companies, to studios, to production companies. And it goes a long way. What we haven't said is the docuseries that I am doing about how I met these guys and the information that I'm going to be telling people in the entire project, we are doing with a major network, and I can't announce who that is just yet, but I think that's going to help give the kind of stamp of credibility that everybody's going to hope this project has.
I guess maybe where Robert was heading with that question was whether if they pull the rug out from under you, somebody could change their mind.
Well, they could, and you know as well as I, and some of our offline conversations is, we're playing with something that's much bigger than us, and we got to be respectful, and we got to be careful. But my story here is that. Once people know what's going on, there's no one's going to be vilifying anything that they've done. They're gonna want to help, and I think that they need to. I'm thinking that the very first thing I was told at NASA was, this is a very good time for this. This is a, quote, very, very good time for this project. So I'm sensing good things.
Well, that's sort of how we started the conversation this evening, is the idea that somebody has almost like flipped the light switch, that we don't exactly know for sure why it's a good time, but I'm glad that we're able to talk about it. And in a moment, we'll open up the phone lines again after the break and take more of your questions and comments from my guest, Tom DeLonge, here on Coast to Coast AM. The Beatles, Tomorrow Never Knows, the final track of an amazing album released 50 years ago this year. It's called Revolver. We're talking about Tom DeLonge. One segment remains. The phone lines look pretty full. So, folks, when I call on you, let's get right to it so we can be courteous with the rest of the folks who are waiting to ask their questions or make their comments. One segment remains. Stay with us. Our final segment with Tom DeLonge, we're going to JJ in Washington State. Hi, JJ. You're on with Tom.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call. Tom, it's an honor to talk to you. I've been listening to your music for about 20 years, seen you in concert a bunch of times, and a real fan of yours, and looking forward to what you're working on right now. So my question is, you've mentioned China Lake a couple times, going out there and whatnot, and I'm familiar with the area. I have some connections there myself. But I'm just curious because your former bandmate, Mark Hoppus, is originally from Ridgecrest, California, right there next to it. And if I understand right, his father used to work there at China Lake. So I was just wondering, did he ever make mention of any kind of secret stuff that he was working on there, or did that kind of spark your interest early on from like your interest in UFOs and all that stuff?
That's a pretty great question, and I applaud you for knowing that detail. Yeah, he is from out there, and his dad worked on some incredible special access programs. I tried to pry into that box a couple of times, got denied. So that was early on. Maybe my pitch wasn't so good, but he definitely is somebody that worked on some really cool stuff.
I would add that China Lake, at least based on what people have told me, has a lot of really interesting connections to this particular topic and to Area 51. Some of the same people go back and forth, but I can't quote any specifics on it. Thanks for the call, though, JJ. We're going to try a first-time caller, Jeannie, in Austin, Texas. Hi, Jeannie.
Hi, guys. Tom, I just wanted to tell you that unless your show is like on Showtime, HBO, I would feel like you were being censored, and I wouldn't have any interest in it. I mean, I know that I don't know how else to say it. Maybe I'm the cynical, part of all this. And then second thing I want to tell you is, why are you alive and you were given the opportunity when filmmakers like James Allen, who I personally think was killed when he got too close to finding out information about anti-gravity vehicles and was doing a documentary? I don't get it. That's my...
Well, I appreciate it. It's funny. I'm already in the middle of meeting those same networks that you're talking about, and I hope that we can end up in a place as elevated like that. It's a whole new frontier in television and film. There's a lot of different places. You never would have thought a place like Amazon would have been one of the best networks to be on. No one, you never would have thought Netflix would have been. Now Showtime's kind of considered cooler, and sometimes at HBO. And HBO was the coolest thing for a while. It constantly changes. So I'm pretty confident we'll end up somewhere good. As far as why was I given this? I touched on this a little bit earlier in the show, but it's a super important question. Number one, I have access to these people because of what I do for a living, and as long as I don't mention the whole UFO thing, I can pretty much meet whoever. But once I get in there, I'm very respectful, and I'm very passionate, and I'm very knowledgeable about the subject. What you might not have heard earlier is that I presented a thesis that made its way through the DoD that in turn got me a meeting with someone that was deep in intelligence out in Washington, D.C. So it was that thesis and the kind of academic nature of it that got people interested in talking to me, not only because of who I was, but because I seemed to have, an elevated knowledge of the subject matter. And then after that, the main reason why they continued to work with me and really gathered around in support of the project is because I executed it in a way on many different things that are frankly pretty hard to do. And over a year and a half, the way I've done that, releasing everything step by step and gathering all these different people from different places in the government and bringing them all together and holding very high-level meetings, between Washington, D.C. and the people that I'm working with. I think all these things combined really created just a canvas for something new to happen. And but I do understand it. I get that people are like, "Why you? You play in a band. How did you do this?" Well, it's kind of a long story, but that's why the docu-series that will be coming out will be explaining this in more detail.
And I guess the answer to the question why he hasn't been killed is because Tom is doing something with their okay at the moment, and whether or not anybody else has been killed for getting too close to the secret, I'm not quite sure about that. But thank you for the call, Jeannie. We're going to go west of the Rockies. Ernest, hi, Ernest. You're on with Tom DeLonge.
Hey, George. Thanks for taking my call. Hello, Mr. DeLonge. And I'm with some of the other ones. Let me just say this first. You keep saying religious wars. I think that was the end, 1600s. But anyway, you say, how do you know you're not being used as disinformation, first of all? And the second of all, if these aliens crashed, that just shows that they're fallible. They can make mistakes. And Bill, I think he was on your show, George. Bill, he did the UFO show, and he said that he was, and somebody's lying then, because that sheriff who came up on that cattle mutilation said that he saw a human head and a hand in that cow. And Bill said it was because he got too close taking pictures from the hotel room of airplanes flying into Area 51 and he was taking those serial numbers, and somebody told him that he was getting too close to these bovine serum is close to human serum, and he said that he was getting really too close, and he upset people that, I think to quote him, he said that were bigger than you, meaner than you, and ugly.
Okay, well, let's. You've asked several questions. Let's give Tom a chance to tackle them. First one was about how do you know you're not being used for disinformation?
Well, because of the conditions of how I met these people, how I brought them together, and the way the relationship works. And these are not, I know exactly who they are. I know their full bios. I know their current positions, and they're not counterintelligence people.
You sought them out, right?
It would just be a different situation if they were different people. The second thing is, about the religious wars. There still are religious wars going on, obviously, today, and based on people's very, very deep belief systems. We've been over in the Middle East for a very long period of time, and there's some really horrible things that are going on over there. But and then mentioning UFOs being fallible, that might be the case. They might be fallible, or they might be crashing on purpose. The way it's been explained to me is that either by accident or by design, the effect of those crashes is giving greater weapons of war to the people that are fighting each other here on the planet, meaning our country against this country, or our country against this group that has this belief system, and that is what they're looking at. It's not so much how it crashed. It's more like, well, what are the effects of it? And I think that's what makes this a bit more scary.
And on the point of cattle mutilations, I don't think your group is saying that all cattle mutilations are carried out by aliens or the others. We've had some discussions on the program before that there might be other folks who are operating under the umbrella of that stuff, very human people who are carrying out similar kind of operations for their own purposes. But did you get any insight onto the cattle mutilation stuff?
Yes, I did. But I go in for very specific. People, once again, I think, people are going to be very, very emotional about all this stuff, especially if you spent your whole life reading all of the conspiracy stuff out there about UFOs, and you think you have the full picture because you read all these books or all the websites, and you're absolutely sure that this is how it is because I saw this weird website that talked about this one thing. I'm not out to prove that this stuff's real. I'm out to tell people answers to very specific questions. So when it comes to the cattle mutilations, I go and I ask a very specific question about the cattle mutilations, and I get a very specific answer. Yes, it is the UFO phenomenon doing it. But I don't go in there and say, well, how many are real, or when they find gas masks, are you guys dropping those off just to make people think it's all human so no one gets scared? Or I don't get into all those details. These people, they're too important to deal with my laundry list of thousands of other questions that I wish I could ask.
East of the Rockies, John in St. Louis. Hi, John, you're on with Tom. Good morning.
Good morning, George. Good morning, Tom. Very interesting. Long-time listener. I got a comment and then a question, and I'll try to make it quick. The comment is that my worldview, this all does make sense. Things seem to be different phenomena, seem to be tied together, and it seems like catch me if you can. I'm over here. No, I'm over here. They're fooling with mankind. And my worldview is that, first of all, life is a miracle. Einstein said as much. There's a spiritual world. We just celebrated Easter. Here you have a man in history.
Damn it, you got me.
No
I can't
doubt
believe you
he's the
fucking
most
got
famous
me. I
one
ate a raw
person
fish.
in the entire world. He defied the laws of physics. All the miracles he did, he defied the laws of physics, doing all these miracles.
Maybe his
he
ship
could
is
do it
sinking.
because he wrote the laws of physics. And I think the Bible explains, has a lot to do with what we see about the UFOs. There's that famous Italian painting with the two aerodynamic things chasing in the background with the crucifixion with the three on Calvary. So there's a lot of mystery to it. But the Bible does say that in the end time that Satan has the power of the air, that it is demonic, and the whole big picture is they're trying to deceive mankind.
Okay, John, I'm going to have to ask you to get to the question part of it.
The question is what does he think about that? And also, what does he say? I believe Tom is very sincere on this, but there's a lot of movies and books and all this stuff is for profit. And that's a red flag whenever you delve into that, because there's a money motivation. I'm not
okay, we're going to hear what he has to say about that.
Well, I think, number one, the Bible is a very, very important book in all of this stuff, as so are a lot of other religious books that are out there. I think that that when you look into the way religions have written text, how the text points to gods in the sky with their various vehicles and what they're doing and how the world got created and all these different things. I think everyone's talking about the same stuff.
Oh shit, he's coming.
The way it's been explained to me, and I know a lot of, I was raised like a lot of suburban kids were, going to church every Sunday. My mom was a very religious lady. She was a Christian. My household was kind of split down the middle, but I'm very familiar with the Christian religion. That was a major part of my life. I'm not with that faith anymore, but I understand what the Bible is, and I understand, what it means to people. But what's interesting is I moved away from it for many years, and when I got deeper into this subject matter, it seemed to make a lot more sense to me. I'm from a different belief system that mankind has created the religions, but the stories are very important. The stories are saying something, and they're all saying the same thing about a bunch of people that came here from somewhere else. And there's one group, yes, trying to deceive mankind and hates mankind, and then there's another part of it that doesn't feel that way about man. So, but I'm not a religious scholar, but I think there's something that I've once heard the Bible referred to as, it's the guidebook of the supernatural, and I go, well, that might be a better way to call it for someone like me. But coming back to like doing things for profit, books and movies, well, yeah, it takes, if anybody has any clue how much it costs to make a movie, think about the show House of Cards. You're like, oh, it's a TV show. It costs $100 million to make 20 episodes. $100 million. So the only way you can make something that speaks internationally to that many people on that level, you need to be able to create something that is compelling enough for someone to say, I'm going to put $100 million into that television episode or that one movie, and then I'm going to put in another $100 million to market that. So how the hell are we going to get back $200 million? It's a big business. It's a very complex business, but it happens to be our biggest export as a country. So I'm doing it the best I can. But it's just the reality and the economics of how entertainment works.
I guess we could all work for free, and then it wouldn't cost anything. If everybody agreed to work for free, who's in? I'll see a show of hands. We're going to try the international line. Dave in Toronto. Hi, Dave.
Just speak with you both. And Tom, I think you're right on the money. One of my best contributions so far in this fight on the battlefield Earth so far has been to put out a series of books about deep underground military bases and repelling an alien invasion of the Greys. And I make a nod in my books to the Gnosticness of the Archons. Are these others you're talking about the Archons, or I've also heard you reference it could be the Anunnaki? I just wanted you to maybe speak to that a little bit. And have you heard anything about benevolent aliens as well? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, because what you just said is you're hitting it right on the money. There are massive programs underground and in other places to create a global defense system. Largely, a lot of it was done in the 80s. The SDI, the Reagan Star Wars Defense Initiative, was part of it. And we were doing that in collaboration with the Soviet Union. A lot of people thought we were at each other's throats, which we kind of were, but we were also working with them in certain parts of their government on the whole SDI system. And I think that was a lot of that is what led to Reagan and Gorbachev getting along and forming some type of a friendship there. But the other thing that you said, bringing up the Anunnaki and all that stuff, the way it was explained to me is, yes, there are good gods and bad gods, and their interactions with humanity has been well documented all the way back through Greek myth, and then even further back into the Sumerian legends.
I'm going to get this Shipset soon.
I actually have communications that are detailing very specific leaders within Sumer and within ancient Greece. Very specific people that I am being told to communicate that were given types of information from these gods. It's insane. I don't to think about that. I don't have all the details. I have very specific things I'm supposed to do and say, and there's certain questions I have to ask to get more information, because it's going to be a very short discussion for me just to say what I've been told and not have anything else to go on. I think the point to really take from all of this is that those stories are true from the perspective of the people that wrote them. So they differ in different areas of the world a little bit. They call the gods different names, or they they side with different gods. But the idea that right now there's 3 monotheistic faiths, and the rivalry between them is by design, period. A communication that I had a few weeks ago is that human beings have a tendency to organize around religious belief systems as long as there is a priestly class, quote unquote, meaning that human beings will align behind different religions as long as there's a leader of that religion that they can kind of call their hero, and our government has known that, and they're actively trying to come up with a campaign to get people to understand that and not fall into that deception.
Thanks to all the callers. Tom, I appreciate you being here. I guess this was the rollout.
It was. We have the Rolling Stone article is going to launch on the 8th. Secret Machines novel is in all the bookstores on the 5th. The docuseries is going to launch after that. I'm trying my hardest to get good information to everybody. I'm not going to get told everything, but the stuff that I have been told is just unreal, and it makes me excited. I think the people within the DoD are doing some incredible work, and it's damn time they get what they deserve, which is some credit.
Tom DeLonge, thanks very much for being here, and if your advisors are listening tonight, I hope there's more to come. Thank you also to A.J. Hartley, who was with us earlier, and to my colleagues at Coast, Jeff Duray, G. Lee, Dan Galati, our webmaster, Lex, and Chris Boros, the producer. Good night, everyone.
So yeah, that's the stream, folks. I doubt that whoever this person is gonna let me just roll up on their ship, but I was thinking of sending it at them in a fiery glory. Oh, it's a Reaper. Oh, it's the monkey. That's the level 5 Reaper I killed. Fuck him. Fuck that motherfucker. Time to die, fool. I hate you. I hate you and all that you stand for. You scum. You scum. Time to die. Come on, raise up. Come on. Come on. What the fuck? I'm going right past it. That's so weird. There we go. Adios, amigos. Too bad your ass got sacked.
Are you ready, kids? I can't hear you!
Science!
Don't fuck with the Jedi Knight, son. Next time. Don't fly Reapers. Not on my map. Not while I'm sailing. It'll be the last thing you do. Did he defeat the guy? Oh shit, I see him. He's swimming towards me. I see the mermaid. I see the mermaid. You're not gonna fool me. Don't fly Reapers if you know what's good for you. Let's go see if he's fucking gone. I don't see a mermaid. Do I see a fucking mermaid? Yeah, he's still around. I wonder if he's just on the island. That's all I want. What does he have? Nothing. Thanks for your second flag. I will gladly take it. You can't beat that. 2 flags for 1. Arr. Must be the luck of the Sunken Sorrow. Sorry about your Reaper ship. But you shouldn't have flown the Reaper flag if you don't want to pay the consequences. doing? Don't fear the Reaper. Oh, God. I'm going to pull in real close. Because I am done. The stream is over. I hope you learned something today. Like, don't fly Reaper flags unless you want to get sunk. And I have a beautiful new ship. Look. Anybody wants some sushi? Thanks for watching my stream. Aaron McDonald, thanks for saying hi. Hard. Mateys. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your day. Peace out, motherfuckers. Stay tuned for more Harry and I Fry.